Afghanistan under the Taliban control has been the global headline grabber for the last 2 months. On the 15th of August, the Taliban took over Kabul. Just a few days later, US and NATO troops left the country, ending America's longest war in Afghanistan. A lot has happened during that time. A few weeks ago, US military leaders stood in front of lawmakers and answered questions about the hasty pullout, the loss of lives, and the sudden fall of the Ashraf Ghani government. Our correspondent, Anas Malik, is in Kabul, where he talked to the Deputy Information Minister and Chief Spokesperson of the Taliban, Zabihullah Mujahid, on the US testimonies. Listen in.
That the US top military bosses, during their testimonies on Afghanistan to the US lawmakers, they have said, and I quote, that Taliban for them were terrorists and will remain terrorists. Do you think that the Biden administration has or will have a different opinion when they're sitting down with you on the negotiating table, given that Pentagons' assertions, do you not think that Pentagons' assertions would also mean that there would also be issues for the Taliban to get off the UN sanctions list?
اصلي موضوع دا د امریکا په رهبری کې خصوصا په نظامی چارواکو کې ګډوډي معلومیږي. اول دا چې اسلامي امارت نه تروریست وو نه تروریست دا په دې مورد چې امریکا څه وایي د خبرې غلطې دي مګر ردوو. او بل د امریکا د موږ سره تعامل کړی په 2020 کې موږ دوی ترمنځ یو په دوحه کې پریکړه وسو توافق وسو نو کدی موږ تروریست بولي بیا څنګه له تروریستانو سره دوی توافق کولی شي دا دوی باندې سوال ده. بل خبره دا ده چې موږ حس کوو چې جنگي ډلې په امریکا کې موجود دي یا جنگي چارواکي یا نظامی چارواکي هغوی د جنگ نه ډېره شخصي بهره برداري کوله. د امریکا جنگ په افغانستان کې روانو دوی شخصي ګټې هم په دې کې تعقیبولې. اوس هغه جنرالان غواړي په دغسې اظهاراتو سره بیرته حالات متشنج وښیي تشنج ته بوځي. خو موږ غواړو چې امریکایي سیاسون په دې مورد باندې خپل تصمیم ونیسي او دغه جنرالان چې بې مسؤلیته خبرې کوي او بې مسؤلیته اظهارات کوي د دې مخه ونیول شي. د افغانستان سره دوی د ښه تعامل لپاره او ښه ډیپلوماسۍ د منځته راتګ لپاره کار وکړي. موږ هم په دې برخه کې کار کوو څو دوه ښه هیوادونه په نړۍ کې واوسو او یو له بل سره همکاري ولرو، نه داسې یو له بل سره تنش وجود ولري او اړیکې مو سره خرابوي. دا د امریکا په ګټه هم نه دي، د افغانستان په ګټه هم نه دي.
WION correspondent Anas Malik is joining us live on this broadcast from Kabul for more on this story. Now, good evening to you, Anas. You spoke with Zabihullah Mujahid, and now he says the Taliban wants to see progress in talks with the US and wants to have ties with Washington for political reasons. Take us through what he means by this and the importance of this for the Taliban.
Well, yes, Alison, I spoke to Zabihullah Mujahid, the chief spokesperson of the Afghan Taliban and the deputy information minister of the current Afghan government as well. And he was very, very clear on these Doha talks. He said that they are talking because they would want to devise a mechanism forward. They understand that they would want to have good relations with all the countries, specifically with the United States. He said that whatever that has happened in the past, the war, the reason for the war is now over. So now it is greater need for engagement. The fact that the Afghan imports and exports should resume, bilateral trade should resume, the fact that the Afghan Taliban attaches greater importance to the United States politically as well, because one thing that is very certain over here, apart from Zabiullah's comments, as we understand that if the United States is negotiating with the Afghan Taliban, that means the West would be putting their weight behind. Therefore, it gives good optics. It gives something to boast about to the Taliban, that if the US can sit down with them and talk on whatsoever the reasons would be, the agenda can be different or can be differentiative from both the sides. But regardless of that, the good omen is, or the highlight is, that they are talking, and that is what Zabihullah Mujahid's emphasis was. Alison?
Right, and now stay with us while we go further into this story. It's in the first high-level talks between the US and the Taliban officials that have concluded. The talks held in Doha was the first high-level meet between the two sides after the US's troop withdrawal from Afghanistan. Now, in the meeting that lasted through Saturday and Sunday, the US and the Taliban officials discussed humanitarian assistance, counter-terrorism plans, and the evacuation programs, among several other issues. And sources tell WION that during the talks on the aid program, the United States set transparency as the prime condition. The US also asserted that the Taliban leaders' delisting from the UN sanctions list and unfreezing of the Taliban's assets depend on the formation of an inclusive government, as well as granting women their rights. Now, coming back to you and us, now, this meeting that has lasted for the last 2 days, the US and Taliban officials have discussed all these issues. Now, what were the outcomes of these talks?
Well, there is no definitive outcome except for the fact that the two countries or the two regimes, one of them being a regime, one of them being a superpower, are talking. The Taliban wanted to negotiate with the US as somebody who they have just defeated. The US wanted to talk to the Taliban from that position of power because they're a superpower, and that is where the stalemate was. We saw that active diplomacy being done by Mutlaq al-Qahtani. He was in and out of DC. He was shuttling between DC, Doha and Kabul, and then these talks took place. We knew about this meeting since weeks. Yesterday, the agenda from the US side, it focused on three things. First was humanitarian aid. Second was the implementation of Doha Agreement, abidance of Doha Agreement, and the third it came with regards to security and cooperation. And on the part of the Taliban, yesterday they rather emphasized on unfreezing of Afghan assets. They said that it's a clear no with regards to when it comes to counter-terror cooperation. They would not be allowing the US to use these OTH or over-the-horizon strikes. And the third being that they would want to have acceptance within the international community. Today, the round of talks focused on humanitarian assistance as well, but it came with a caveat. The US side said that it would want to ensure transparency, and unless if it's not ensured, then the humanitarian assistance process or the ongoing process can possibly take a hit. On the other hand, there were talks on COVID-19 vaccination cooperation as well. There were talks with regards to women workers being sent back, and the Taliban say that they have actually come out and pointed out that women, female hospital workers, they're back at work, so they have no issues. This is what the Taliban have been claiming, but then it's a long way to walk. Other than that, with regards to counter-terror cooperation, there were talks, and the Taliban have agreed upon that they will be cooperating, but without intelligence sharing. So that would be a tricky right to be on. Additionally, the other thing is the other good thing is rather that the two countries have decided to chalk out future mechanism of such talks, something what Zabihullah Mujahid had pointed to us about as well. And now the next round of talks would continue today. Talks with the US officials has ended. From tomorrow, representatives of EU countries would be meeting the Taliban back in Doha, and we might be expecting some more meetings, some headway on that. But for now, the Taliban would be chest thumping that in the absence of international recognition, there is some convergence, there is some talks that are ongoing, and talks with no regional countries, but with a superpower like the United States of America. Alison?
And us, we'll leave it there. Thanks very much for bringing us all the latest out of those talks.
WION, now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.